This is Kim Bussey. I'm your Key Relationship Manager, and we're so excited that you joined us today for our very first webinar series of 2018. We are going to be talking about 7 things you need to develop your team. Before we begin and before I introduce our amazing co-presenter today, Wendy Schaeffer, I want to do a couple of quick things. At the top of your screen, you're going to see an icon of a person with their hand raised. If you will go ahead and raise your hand if you can hear me so that I know we have sound. Also, if you ever agree or disagree with what Wendy or I is saying, you can click that. If you need us to speak a little louder or speak a little softer, you want us to speed up or slow down, you can let us know by that. Also, laughter and applause is always appreciated. This will be interactive and the webinar is being recorded. At the end of our session today, you will be able to download a copy of our presentation. And in about a week, our webinar will be available on our YouTube channel. Now, if you have not subscribed yet, shame on you. Make sure you do that, as well as follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, or Facebook, because we will be able to, you'll receive some notifications, some great articles, as well as just keep in touch with what Omnia is doing. So now that we've got all of the housekeeping out of the way, let me present to you my wonderful co-host today, Wendy Schaeffer. Wendy is our SVP of Operations. Wendy, why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Wendy Schaeffer. Like Kim said, I'm the SVP of Operations here at the Omnia Group. So I manage our analysts who are writing those reports for everybody. I've been here 20 years, which, like Kim said, I hate to admit that because it's dating me, but I have about 25 years of management experience, and we have some great content, so it's very exciting.
Thanks, Wendy. So Wendy started when she was 8.
Ah,
And between Wendy's management experience of 25 years and my management experience of about 25 years, you're going to get about 50 years of experience between the two of us today, talking about all about developing your team. And as we begin, I want to share some staggering statistics with you. In a recent survey, a national survey of over 400 employees spanning 3 generations, the baby boomers, Gen X, and millennials, 70% said that job-related training and development opportunities influenced their decision to stay at their job. Wow, 70%. So if you don't think that team development is important, let me just clarify that point right now that it is. Of those 400 employees, once again, spanning those 3 generations, 40% of them said that they didn't receive the 40% of those employees who don't receive the necessary job training to become effective will leave their positions within 1 year, the first year. So as we begin to talk today, make sure that you're taking notes. If you have questions, and you can go ahead and type them in the chat box. We will have a Q&A session at the end, but ask your questions as we go along. It's staggering to me. So the amount of money that a company spends on hiring the right person, to know that if there is not a job training program or development, that position will be open again within a year, it's disheartening as a manager. How many of you, raise your hand, how many of you are part of that hiring process where you are making decisions on who's joining either your company or your team? There's several of you. So as you think about that, we want to make sure that we're starting from the very moment of selection all the way through engagement. We're going to be talking about that today. In another study, 74% of the employees who were surveyed felt that they weren't achieving their full potential at work due to lack of development opportunities. So once again, we are hearing from employees, and it doesn't matter the generation. So I hear a lot of times, oh, baby boomers are, aging out, so why should we contribute to their job development? Or millennials, they're hit or miss. But it doesn't matter. What our employees want is to feel valued, to know that they're not just a number, but also to have some sort of team development, to have that development to understand as an individual, here's how I contribute to the team, and how is my employer going to invest in me? If I'm investing 40 plus hours a week, year after year after year, what are the development opportunities? And as leaders, our role is to develop our teams, not for, and we see in these statistics, it doesn't only need to be for employee engagement, but also for retention. But the question is, how do we do that? And what are some of those obstacles that we have that keep us from doing it?
So some obstacles of development are, there's three main ones. The first one is I just don't know how. I don't have time. And the third, I don't want to. With the I don't know how, I think people kind of forget that management is about skills, and you have to learn those skills like anything else, whether you're coming into a job and learning how to be a customer service rep, learning how to sell. Management has hard skills, and oftentimes people are promoted into management and they're not taught those skills, so we learn them on the job. And it takes us a while to learn how to hire effectively, conduct great interviews, develop our people, communicate, motivate. All of those things we have to learn how to do. So when we don't know how, it becomes an obstacle of how we're going to develop our people, and we push it off to the side. The other thing that happens is we don't have time. I mean, this is so common, and we're, as working managers, you're not only managing your team, but you're also having to do your job, your projects, your deadlines, and meeting those things. Then we're also putting out fires for our team. We have lots of questions, people are coming to us. Before you know it, the day is gone, the week is gone, the month is gone, the year is gone, and you haven't spent time developing your people. So what we want to do is try to remove some of these obstacles, and we'll learn that today. The last thing is I don't want to. And maybe you don't want to because of the first two reasons. You don't know how, or you don't have time. But also it could be that it's just a little bit against maybe your personality type. For example, if you're a perfectionist, oftentimes we think to ourselves, oh my goodness, it's just easier for me to do it myself than to show someone how to do it. And I know it will be right if I do it myself, which is great in the short term, but in the long term, that's problematic. And it's not good for our team either. The other thing is that we might be somebody who doesn't like conflict. And we know that when we have this development conversation with an employee, we know that their aspirations might not fit with what the company can offer or what we think they can do. And we don't want to have that uncomfortable conversation. Or maybe you're an introvert and having those face-to-face conversations is just a little bit painful on you. So you put it off and put it back. So what we're going to do today is to talk about how to overcome these obstacles, and we've got 7 great steps to do that. Start there.
Yeah, so step one is your leadership. Exactly what Wendy said is to understand and be self aware of what your strengths and your challenges are. Understand how you communicate. Now, if you're saying, Kim, this is great, but going back to what Wendy said about, I don't know how to do that. I was promoted and my leadership training was, congratulations, you're a manager. Here's your team. Here's the keys. Now go forth. If that is you, we can help you in a few different ways, but definitely you wanted to stay tuned to the end to hear about our February leadership webinar series. But you've got to know who you are. Now, when you're understanding who you are and how you communicate, going back to that, am I analytical? Am I a perfectionist? And now, what are those areas of opportunity, those challenges where I can move forward? Once you understand yourself, how you communicate, how you motivate, those natural behaviors, those instincts that you're going to revert to in a perfect world or in a stressful world, and let's face it, leadership is stressful. So, how are you going to react when you have that fifth interruption and you're working on a tight time frame? As you learn that, as you begin to have your personal development, which starts with developing your team, then you can begin to understand others, whether they're your peers, whether it's your direct reports on your team, of understanding what are those potential obstacles for them. What are those obstacles between, as a leader, me connecting with them, understanding their strengths and challenges of the individual, because we're going to talk about team development, but these steps all formulate and start at at the basic of the individual. They say that there's no I in team, right? Which is true. But a team is made up of individuals, and it's not one size fits all development. What speaks to someone moving very quickly and show me 14 things at one time, because I love the challenge of learning multiple things at one point, can actually demotivate somebody else. And so, as that leader, you've got to understand who you're working with, what their strengths and challenges are, and then you've got to adapt and apply. As leaders, we have to adjust our leadership style to create those engagement points. Now, I am not telling you that you have to think of be insincere. What I am telling you is that, you know I may be very relational and filter everything through the people, so maybe I need to take a step back before making a decision and really talking through what are the facts. Let me think through this. So what I want you to do, remember I said this was going to be interactive. I want you to think of a leadership trait that you feel that every successful leader should have. And think of it, try to use one word, just name that trait. Go ahead and type it in that chat box. So you may say that a successful leader has to be assertive. So go ahead and type in whatever it is. So we see things. Good listener, great. What else are some of those traits that you think a successful leader should have? Honesty, confidence, empathy, kindness, absolutely. What else? A good communicator. So we're seeing that vision, trustworthy, empathy. Love that. I think empathy is something that is necessary. It's not something that we can teach. What about they need to be able to address conflict and resolve it, not necessarily like I'm jumping in and dealing with it immediately, but to be able to facilitate that. And what I'm seeing is that integrity, empathy, trustworthiness is all critical. You've got to take time as that leader to self-reflect and say, do I walk my talk? And if not, why not? As you're coaching and developing those potential leaders, you have to help them understand their strengths and challenges. But you may be saying, okay, this is great, but really, how do I even get to that point? Well, there's something that we help with that, because all four of us, everyone is made up of four basic behavioral traits. And those traits are going to be something that Wendy's sharing with us.
So everybody has four drivers in their personality. And what that means is, what's driving me towards certain tasks? What do I enjoy doing and why? And so the first one is assertiveness. You can see then we have communication, pace, and structure. So assertiveness, are you a naturally take charge person, or you're comfortable with conflict? Maybe you're competitive. You like to lead people and processes. You're not afraid to push to get what you want. That would be somebody with a high level of assertiveness. Another type would be your non-assertive personality. So cautious, supportive, team-oriented, tend to avoid conflict. I'd rather not compete with my peers, but have team goals. And the reason why this is so important is, as you're developing your people and picking a path for them, and they're picking a path for themselves, you want to understand why it is that they're asking for certain things. So not everybody wants to be a manager. Your non-assertive people might be very comfortable growing within the organization as an individual contributor. So maybe that means that they just become more specialized in their job. Maybe they become a peer mentor to new hires, but they're comfortable where they are rather than leading others. Because oftentimes we feel like maybe everybody wants to be promoted into a management position or into some sort of role that gives them a little bit more leadership. And that's not necessarily true. And that's often driven by someone's assertiveness level. And the interesting thing, too, about personality and drivers is that you can have employees with the same drivers, but they have different interests. So just because somebody is assertive doesn't necessarily mean that they all want to go into the same thing. So you can have somebody who wants to be in management, somebody who wants to be in sales, somebody who maybe has a passion for programming and computers and wants to do that. So that's why communication is so important, and Kim's going to talk about that here. The communication style is the second driver that we measure in a personality type. And what we mean by that is, how does somebody derive their energy and their thinking? How do they think and process information? So there's, again, two types of people, and there's a spectrum of this too, different levels. You can have somebody who is very social and somebody who's somewhat social to highly analytical and to very reserved. So the first type would be your sociable individuals, and those are the ones that really get their energy from tasks where they're interacting with people, whether it's face to face or on the phone. They love talking to people. They're energized by it, and so they're going to gravitate towards tasks like that. And they tend to process information intuitively. They like to think out loud. Now, your analytics would be the other side of the coin. So those are your more reserved employees. They gravitate towards tasks that are maybe a little bit more heads down and data intensive. They get their energy from tasks that are, I guess, more solitary would be a great way to put that. And it doesn't mean they don't like to interact with people, but that they don't get their energy that way. So oftentimes when we look at our customer service team here, for example, the highly sociables are just, after they get off a really long call, they're so hyped up and they're coming out and talking about the phone call, whereas the analytical customer service reps tend to need some downtime after a particularly long call. So it's like, okay, I just, I need to go on D&D for a minute, recharge, process this, make my notes. So how you communicate and process information is going to be key to understanding what types of tasks your employee is going to want to evolve with, to develop. The third thing is pace. And you've got people who are fast-paced and multitasking, and they thrive in an environment with change. They work well under time pressure, and they're very adaptable. Sort of, just, I'm starting this project, but something else comes along. I have no problem dropping what I'm doing and moving on to the next thing and then going back to that later. Whereas other people are very methodical and process oriented. So they like to do one thing at a time. And in development, this is very important too, because you want to make sure that you're introducing change gradually, that you are giving them good deadlines, that they've got time to finish what they start. So as you can see, as we're building this, is it's providing you as a leader with a roadmap for starting those development discussions and getting them on the right path. The last thing that we measure is structure. So again, like everything else, there's two sides to this coin. The first are the people who are very independent. They like to do things their own way. They work very well with ambiguity. So what you need to do is just give them a basic outline and they want to run with it. And then you have your structured employees. Now these are the ones, and I'm guilty of this, I'm very much this person, dot every I, cross every T. I like to know what's expected, what the deliverable is supposed to look like. Do you have any special instructions I need to know? I'm very detail oriented. So give me everything so that when I do it, I know it's right and I don't have to go back and fix it. So you've got your very detail oriented structured employees, and then your very independent, let me figure it out employees. And as you can see, once you're figuring this out and figuring out who you are, and your self-awareness will allow you to develop your people and follow that roadmap.
So, as Wendy was saying, it's important to understand those natural behavioral traits, not only for your self, but for your team as well, because that leads you to step two, which is communication. So, as you understand those drivers, if I know, for instance, I'm talking to Wendy. Wendy, do you like it when I give you, hey, this is what we sold. I need you to create this for me. How does that work out for you when we're having
Well,
conversation?
I'm going to ask you a million questions, and it tends to make me a little nervous.
And if I'm not in the mindset to say, okay, I know she's going to ask me a million questions, then there's been some times, especially when we first began working with each other, that we drove each other a little bit crazy, right?
That's true.
Because she's thinking, can she not just tell me what she's thinking and the feedback? And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, there are a million questions. So as we begin to develop this working relationship, as we begin to develop working with each other, and understanding those natural drivers, which by the way, that's what Omnia does. So we have the cheat sheet in front of us, literally outside of everyone's door. But we have to implement it. So one, we're going to teach you a lot. But if you're not using this information and you're not communicating it with your team, guess what? It's not going to do you any good. So, step one, understand yourself, be aware. It all starts with leadership. Step two starts with how you communicate. And communication is key, not only in the day to day development, but starting at the very beginning with selection, onboarding, how you're going to motivate them, how you're going to keep your team accountable, and then with engagement. And these are going to be additional steps. So, as you begin to understand this, now let's begin to really dive a little bit deeper about your leadership communication. And I know that Wendy talked about it a little bit, but Wendy, talk to us a little bit about the differences between leaders.
Okay, so with communication style and leadership, you've got, again, two sides of the coin. You have your relational leaders and your analytical leaders. With the relational ones, those are highly social people. They tend to lead in a very inspirational way. They're great motivators. So when employees talk about them, they're like, oh my gosh, they make me feel so good. They ask me personal questions. I feel connected to them. They're people oriented and they like to build excitement in their team and they're tapped into feelings so they can kind of read the emotions in a room. And you have your analytical leaders who are very factual problem solvers. So it's oftentimes, and this is me, so I can say, you're logic driven. So what happens is that you're constantly looking for the holes and what are the problems that I need to solve. And that's great. Everything has its place. But what happens is I tend to forget to celebrate accomplishments. I have that mindset of, well, I need to figure out what the problems are so I can get things running smoother and better. And instead, I'm missing out on the opportunity to motivate and provide recognition to my team. So I have to be very conscious of that. That analytical thought process is like, well, why don't I have to, recognize the good things when they're doing well? I mean, that's their job, right? So it's just probably not the best way to think about it. But that's where, as a leader, understanding what your communication style is and how that might be perceived, it might be perceived fine with other analytics, but with the sociable people on my team, they might be feeling a little demotivated by that.
So raise your hand if you think that relational communication styles from leaders are more important. See a couple of people raising their hands. How many of you think that the analytical leadership communicators are better? Raise your hands. Well, it's not a decision. So you're both right. So expanding a little bit on relational, absolutely. So for instance, as Wendy was saying with our relational communicators, they're people oriented. I always like to say they filter everything through people. I am a relational communicator. Surprise! I like to make sure everyone is, we are going to have excitement. I am so excited about this webinar and we're going to develop it. Everything that I do, I tend to filter through how is it going to affect my team, my clients, my peers. Doesn't mean that I can't make the hard decisions because one of my drivers is also assertiveness. So I've got a goal and I want to make sure everyone is happy, but I want to reach my goal first. If I was someone who was much more collaborative, or think about it when you're looking at career pathing and promoting someone, they're going to focus more on, I want to be everyone's friends, which could be a challenge. Now, with that relational communicator too, we may be so busy telling everyone great job that we're actually demotivating our analytical communicators because I've just gone down my office and said, great job, great job, great job. And now that person who's an analytical is thinking, well, Wendy, you're an analytical. What are you thinking? If I've told
I mean,
20 people a great job before I get to you.
it can feel a little insincere.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you're absolutely right, Jenny. Optimally, we need a good balance of both. However, most people typically don't have that balance. It's something that, okay, you have to be aware of. And now this is an area of development for myself that I can work on. So for me, I've learned that I have to ask, one, who am I talking to? Are they going to need more facts? Two, how do they want to be recognized? For me, I'm going to get off of this webinar and be like, woohoo, high fives, give me a parade through the office. The first webinar of 2018 is in the books. It's time to celebrate. For Wendy, she may say, don't do that. Don't send an email out. Don't get on the PA and say, Wendy did a great job. Because how is that going to make you feel, Wendy?
I hate being in the spotlight.
So
Absolutely.
I've had to learn that I need to go to her and say after and say, Wendy, it was great. You shared a lot of information. Loved how you talked about the analytical communicator and give her two or three very job specific feedback. So you need a good balance, but it's not a natural trait. So as you understand that, you learn to adapt and apply what you've learned for developing your team, which feeds right back to step one. Any other questions or comments so far? Great. So we talked about communication is key, which was step two. And step three in developing your team starts with the development process. Or the selection process. I love this quote by Paul Russell. It says, development can help great people be even better, which is truly, in my opinion, the purpose of having development, personal development as a leader, as well as developing your team. But But if I had $1 to spend, I'd spend 70 cents getting the right person in the door. The reason for that is that you have to build a foundation of employee development, and that starts with getting the right person in the right job. Because if you get the right person in the right position, then what's going to happen is you can focus your development time, dollars, efforts into making a good employee even greater, to be better, to teach them more. But if you get a person who is in the position, you've hired someone and they may be the right person in the wrong position, or even the wrong person in the wrong company or the wrong position. Now you're going to be spending your development efforts, dollars, and time to try to bring that person up to a level that is acceptable. It may not be that stellar level, but that's acceptable for what you expect out of that position. So now you're not really developing them for professional growth. You're just trying to get them to a standard that is your minimum level of expectations. So you've got to know from the very beginning, when you begin to develop your team, are you selecting the right person? And this is not only for new employees in an open position, but also think about your current employees that you're looking to promote. Sometimes your top performer in sales is not going to be your best sales manager. So you've got to know what you're hiring for. So the first thing you want to do is review your job description. You want to look at some of those critical behaviors needed for success. And then you want to create a non-negotiable versus a wish list. So what we mean by that non-negotiable is these are the behaviors, the skills, the traits that are necessary and needed to be successful in this role. So for instance, we're currently hiring a salesperson. And so Wendy, tell us about what some of those non-negotiables that we're looking for in a salesperson.
So we definitely want somebody who's very assertive, naturally competitive, and comfortable in a commission environment, which not everybody is. So understanding that those are the must-haves, and also, of course, resilience, somebody who can brush off rejection because it's a sales position. So that's something that they're going to deal with.
Absolutely. And then you have your wish list. So I want to ask you just real quickly, What are some of the factors you look for when you're hiring a new employee? And you can type that in the upper left-hand box. And then in the lower right-hand box, tell me what's the most important factor you look for when hiring. Are you looking for that cultural fit, hard skills, potential, education? So we see some people kind of typing in on those that poll, but go ahead and type in what you're looking for. A good communicator. Oh, go ahead and see some more people typing, and it really depends on the role. So you may say, I want someone who's a good communicator, who's friendly, who's outgoing in a customer service or a client-facing role, but you may not necessarily look for that when it's in IT. They don't necessarily need to talk to people if they're working behind the scenes. Experience, the capacity to learn, education, that work ethic, absolutely, strategic thinker. And when we jump down to this poll down at the bottom, it seems like we've almost got a third, a third, a third split, a little bit more for that cultural fit and potential, and then definitely those hard skills. Do they have the necessary license that's needed? When you determine what those fits are, and I recommend to talking to peers of that um, open position or that position that you're promoting to. Because a lot of times, as leaders, if we're not doing the job day to day, we may forget some of those critical aspects. For example, prior to coming to Omni, I worked in banking. If you've attended any of our webinars or training sessions, you may know this. And we were hiring for a teller, and I sat down with my teller team and said, what are some of the things that we're looking for in a teller? And I had my list, but it was interesting. You know, they've got to be able to multitask. They've got to be detail oriented. They've got to be friendly. We definitely need someone honest. And I said, okay, so what is a wish list? So these, I make a commitment. I am not hiring an employee if they do not fit every single thing on this non-negotiable list. Now, do not make a non-negotiable list that's 100 items long. It needs to be about 10 to 20 items. 20 is really pushing that maximum. Then we had a wish list. The wish list is, kind of those tiebreakers. What could we have? So, for instance, in that particular branch, we had a large percentage of clients that were Spanish speaking. So, it wasn't critical that we had someone who spoke Spanish, but would have been a benefit, a help. So, when we looked at that, interviewed, had two great candidates, both of them, you know, equal education, experience, they all fit everything on the non-negotiable list. But as we were trying to make our determination, I looked at it and said, we have one candidate who speaks Spanish, and that was really okay, that's on our wish list. We wound up offering that position to the candidate. Now, the other candidate actually was hired at another branch because we went through the interview process so well that we knew that she would be a great fit culturally for the bank. And even though it wasn't with our branch, she went on, was hired, and actually moved up. You've got to know what you're hiring for before you can begin to develop. What are those skills? What are we looking for? Once you have understand yourself, once you understand how you communicate, and that you're selecting the right people for the positions, whether it's an internal promotion or lateral move or an outside new employee come in, you have to have a critical onboarding process. And that's step 4 on our 7 things you need to know to develop your team. So, with that, when we look at that onboarding process, you want to create some sort of welcome package. And a lot of times we look at onboarding that only applies to new hires. But you should have an onboarding process as well for those existing employees who have been transferred or promoted. We can't forget that even though they've been with the company for 10 years, this is something new for them. We have to teach them. Wendy, why don't you tell everyone what we do at Omnia as part of that welcome package?
Okay, so what we do for onboarding is we put together a welcome package for our new hires when they come into their office. Oftentimes, Kim has gotten them a little water bottle or some trinkets, which is super nice. And then we also have some informational stuff for them. So one of the things is, and this is very important to everybody, is where do we eat around here? So where can I go? Where's the closest grocery stores, where are the best restaurants, takeout, little helpful things so that they feel like they're building a home here. And then also some tips for the office, little housekeeping things. We provide coffee, for example, where the K-cups are, um, jeans day on Friday, where to park. So just different little things so they're not like floundering around when they first get here. And then we also do like a little bio sheet, and this is just a personal touch. So every employee here wrote up their own little bio on who they are with the company, maybe some personal items, just to make it not quite so all work, no play. And then we also give them a tour right when they get in. So we take them through the building, show them where everything is. We introduce them to anybody who's here, which is just a nice touch because sometimes, you want to put a face to the names and the bio sheet's great, but just to be able to walk around and meet everybody. And we also take our new hires to lunch, and oftentimes that's with their direct supervisor, maybe with the trainer, perhaps with somebody that they interviewed with, just little things so that when they come in, it's not so cold and scary. When I very first started with an insurance company, I'd actually moved from one big insurance company to another, and they did nothing. Like literally, it was like, here's your office, and we're going to start this classroom training. And for a week, I was having this terrible buyer's remorse, if you will. I'm like, oh my gosh, I've made the biggest mistake of my life moving to this company. What have I done? So for a week, it was just very stressful. I didn't feel at home. I didn't feel welcome. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know who to talk to. It was the strangest thing. And what's interesting is it turned out that that company was actually had a much better culture, and overall, I enjoyed it so much more than the company I'd come from. But I really thought I had made a huge mistake. And towards the end of the week, I was practically in tears, like, oh my gosh, I need to go back to where I was. So you want to make them feel comfortable, because change, even for people who are comfortable with change, can be very scary. So an onboarding process is just it's a key, I think, step in development, because it allows you to get moving with somebody who's comfortable and happy. So
Great.
here's your desk.
And it's wonderful. Sorry, Wendy, I just jumped right in. Um, it's wonderful to make them feel welcome, but we can't just focus on the rah-rah cheerleading. You've also got to set expectations. Those expectations of really, what does this job entail? How quickly we expect you to get caught up on it, and then cast that clear vision. So a lot of times people are just excited about having a job. Yay, I'm here. But what we need to do is say, here's the vision. Here's how your role connects to the dots of the company. Here's what our company vision is. So if you have mission statements, if you have vision statements, say, this is our vision statement, and here's how this position plays into it, and connect the dots for them. That's going to go back to, guess what? Step 2, communication. Let's talk through it. And then last but not least is having some sort of training program. And that training program, once again, cannot just focus on the new employee. It have to also focus on leadership or those promotions. And so many times we think, oh, well, they've been in the company, or they should know it. Well, let me ask you, did you know your job when you were either hired or promoted into it? They may see what they think that job entails from the outside, but once you're in the role, especially if it's a promotion into leadership role, what you think a leader does and what they actually do can be completely different. And then you have new employees with minds blown. So you have to have that clear training program in place, which training is step 5.
Yeah. So with training, like Kim was saying, it's definitely not just a new hire thing, but I'm going to start there with when you're training your new hires. I think the first thing that you have to do is have a structured process. And the reason is, and I know we talked earlier about how some people are unstructured, but when you're new to a position, you really want to understand how things are going to go. So in our particular situation, and also when I worked at the insurance companies, it was a classroom training, and that's how it is here at Omnia as well. Now, not every position is like that, but with this one, because it's classroom based and they're actually in the classroom for about 2 weeks, I put together a syllabus like when we were in college. So it's here's what each day is going to look like. Here's what we're going to go over. Even here's when we're going to take breaks. We don't necessarily have to follow it to the letter by any means, but it gives them a crutch and something to look at and go, okay, well, we didn't cover this, or if we covered that, I missed it. I better ask a question. So that structured process gives some confidence to somebody coming in and understanding what their day is going to look like. Also, you want to understand an employee's individual needs, and that goes back to the personality drivers. So when I'm doing a training, I'm really looking at the type of person that's going to be in the training class. So for example, if I'm hiring a group of analysts who are very heads down, analytical, their job literally is writing reports all day, that training is going to go very different from when I'm training our new salespeople. We put them through the exact same classroom piece, but how I'm conducting the session is going to be very different. So for the analyst, I'm really dotting every I, crossing every T. We're going over everything and we're practicing stuff backwards and forwards. Now with the salespeople, I'm going to gloss over a few things that they don't necessarily need to know in their job. I might give them less writing exercises. They're very fast paced and they really just want to know how am I going to present this because they don't have to delve into the product the way that an analyst would. So I always like to look at that. And then, of course, when you're in the classroom, you're going to see their personalities come out and adjust that way too. So like we said, it's always about adapting to their style. Also, you want to know where they are in the process. So asking questions, communicating, staying in touch. Maybe it's giving quizzes. That's what we do. We give quizzes. Some are closed books, some are opened books. So understanding how they're doing. And then for our existing employees, the career pathing piece. And I think, again, it goes back to communication. You want to ask them what they're interested in because you can have analytics who could go in a lot of different directions. Maybe it's customer service, maybe it's IT, maybe it's accounting or research, but you don't know if you don't ask. So you really want to make sure that you understand where their interests lie and where their desires are before you can move forward.
And understanding where they are is critical. So, as we're talking about this training program, once again, there are 4 stages of learning. And how that transitions into the development, once again, is knowing what stage your employee is in to be able to really begin to develop them as individuals. And as you begin to develop them as individuals, then you're making your team stronger. So the first stage is that unconscious incompetent stage. And I like to call that stage that I don't know what I don't know. I'm just happy to be here. It's the puppy dog stage. Most new employees or employees that are promoted into new positions are just thrilled. I've got the promotion. I've got the job. I'm happy. I'm grateful to be here and let me just get to know everyone. The second stage of learning is that conscious incompetence. And I like to call that, it's the I know what I don't know or the honeymoon is over stage. In that stage, that's when people start thinking, what in the world have I gotten myself into? And it's usually right after that, if you have an intensive classroom training, it's right after that training, and now they're on their own for the first time. The third stage is the conscious competent stage, and that is the I know what I know. Okay, things are starting to click. I'm not having to refer to my notes as much. I'm moving forward. I feel more comfortable. And then the last stage is the I don't know what I know. And that's where everything is second nature. I can conduct a webinar, answer emails, and take another call while Wendy is talking. Everything's just second nature. Here's what causes some frustrations for yourself as a manager, as well as for your existing, your mentoring training buddies, is that many times we take someone who's in that unconscious incompetence or conscious incompetence. So I don't know what I don't know, or oh my Lord, I know what I don't know, and how am I going to get it? And we pair them with someone who is in that final stage, who's in that unconscious competence, who so many times you'll ask them, how did you do that? I don't know. I just did it. It's second nature. And each stage lasts about 30 to 60 days. So, as managers, we have to communicate differently with them. We have to really make sure that our expectations that we have, not only for ourselves, but for that employee and the peers on their team, are on the same page. Because you have someone who may be that very blunt, direct person. I don't know why you don't have it yet. You've been here for 30 days. And now, guess what? Your team has a crack in it, a huge crack in it, because you already have someone who's struggling with, am I going to get this? And now they've just been disconnected mentally from that person who's supposed to train them. So, as we're looking at developing them, we have to ask ourselves, how do I manage them to develop them? And so, we're going to talk a little bit about that in the stages, and it all comes down to accountability, which is step 6 in developing your team. You have to understand the stage that your employee is in, to be able to manage them and to hold them accountable, because you're going to hold them accountable in very different ways. So when we look at that first stage, that unconscious incompetence stage, you want to micromanage the training process. Now you may be thinking, I am not a micromanager, and micromanagement is a dirty word. No one wants to micromanage. No one wants to be micromanaged. And Wendy, even as a perfectionist, do you like to be micromanaged?
No,
But
no.
what we're going to do is we're going to define what micromanagement is. Micromanagement is being very specific of what is required and inspecting what is needed frequently. It's that I need to teach you. So I'm going to monitor, really look at what are the steps that you're taking. I'm going to give you daily feedback. I'm going to give you very clear direction. But so many times as leaders, when an employee is in this stage, we take a high level management approach in their development, because we're more concerned about them being happy and staying either in the position or in the company than setting them up for success. And I love to take this back to, development. Your new employee or your existing employees may want to just develop their skills. They don't want to move up. As Wendy said earlier in the webinar, they don't want to move to different position, but they want to learn something new. So Wendy, tell us about what you recently learned, what new skill you learned about this past 3 months.
Well, we had a hole in our accounting department for a few weeks, so I learned how to do some accounting functions, which I never thought would have happened, but I was excited to learn something new and gives me a glimpse into a different part of the company. So it was accounting. You
And
got me.
so when you first talk to us a little bit about how you were trained during when you first started handling cash receipts.
So it was a perfect training because what happened is the controller was sitting with me and going over every field step by step, which as a detail-oriented person or really anybody who's new to a job, that's what you want. And what I did was of course, I did screen prints and I'm highlighting the fields that are critical, making notes so that when I was doing it myself, I had a crutch. But he was very close to the process and I appreciated that.
And even close to the process, he also gave, our CFO gave some clear direction and clear expectations. But one of the expectations that he gave was the ability to know, okay, if you make a mistake, if Wendy made a mistake, it was okay. And to say, I'm sorry, Wendy, what did he specifically say about the
No,
program?
you can't mess anything up, so you can fix anything, which is a great to know because I'm like, well, if I do this and then I post it, are we stuck? And the answer is no. And then also, he checked the work after me daily. So even though I wasn't there seeing him check it, he'd already told me, I'm going to look at everything that you do anyway and check it. So it gives you that sense of, and I didn't feel like that was somebody looking over my shoulder. As a matter of fact, I wanted that. Yes.
And in so many times that when someone is in that first stage, that unconscious incompetence, they want that. So as a leader, as you're developing them, and even as you're pulling a new team together, you want to be very much a part of the process. Now, the second stage, you're going to be able to see that you're having to let go a little bit. So you've got that conscious incompetence. You can manage the training process. So now you're checking in with them. You're offering weekly feedback instead of daily feedback, going back and double checking. And then you want to give encouragement for them as well. So it gives you that ability to really talk with them, because this stage is the danger zone of losing that great employee. They know what they don't know. Frustrations are running high on both sides. So as the leader, you've got to develop them to let them know it's okay. You're progressing exactly as we have, which, going back to the training program, if you're setting that expectation, they're going to have that and be able to take a look at that. But what a lot of times is that someone may ask a question and the other mentoring employee may snap and say, you should know this by now. And then they quit talking about it. So now I'm just going to do what I need to do. You've got to make sure that you're learning from them and you're touching base with them just to make sure, yes, we believe in you. You know, if you have long tenured employees like we do, some of the conversations I've had with new employees is to say, everyone else has been on the team for 10 years. We don't expect you to know what they know right now. You're going to get to it. The third stage is that conscious competence stage, which, as a leader, as you're holding your team accountable, both as an individual and as a group, is you're monitoring the training process. And you may be saying, Kim, this is really focusing on the individual, but how is this going to develop my team? When you're launching new processes, new projects, you're going to have employees who are in this stage as a group. So as you know, okay, as I'm thinking through, how are they processing through the stages as a group? Now I know how to give them that development. So in that third stage, you're going to monitor the training process. You're going to give them consistent feedback, because it all goes back to step 2, which is communication. I've got to tell you what I expect. I've got to inspect what I expect. But I'm also going to give people opportunities. Opportunities to say, such as, tell me what you think about this. Give me some, feedback on this process. How is it working? What do we need to change? Do we need to change anything? They may come back and say, nope, everything's great. Or, I've got a client who's upset. Okay, so tell me what's your solution? And then you listen. And a lot of times when you listen, it's going to allow you to really pinpoint where in the training program or where in the process they need additional training. Okay, yes, you're right on steps 1 through 4. Here's what I would do a little bit different. And as you learn that, they go, oh, okay, now I need to work on this. Or, you know what, you're absolutely correct. Let's move forward. In fact, I think you're ready to move forward to take on something additional. And then the last stage, accountability looks more like mentoring. You want to coach them and mentor them for the next steps. Now, those next steps could be, you know, we're moving you into management, or just asking questions. So, Wendy, do you want to move into accounting?
I do not. I'm happy. No.
I do not. I'm happy. Nope. Don't make me. She learned something new. Was given some opportunities. And what we've learned is, no, I don't want it. As you're developing the team, as you're giving them more opportunities, you're going to find some of your employees go, no, I'm happy. I don't want, I'm happy to help out where I can, but I don't want to do that. Or, you know what? I see myself retiring in 5 years. So now the coaching that you're going to give them is very different. And it goes back to giving career pathing. So you turn more into that coach, that mentor. I'm going to tell you what the next steps are. I'm going to give you the coaching. I'm going to give you the development tools. Maybe it's trainings where, we're looking at you for leadership. So we want to talk to you about what your leadership strengths and challenges are through the Omnia assessment. We're going to talk to you about what's your next steps. And then we're going to give you opportunities to practice that by leading projects. Or, you know what, I do want to retire, or I have no desire to be in management. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to develop you and keep you engaged by, sending you to workshops, sending you to seminars that's going to expand your hard skills. And I'm going to expect you to bring that back and share that with the team. So as you begin to hold your team accountable, and you need to have consistent accountability. Now, what you may say is that, okay, I've got to be consistent, but hold people accountable based on their style and what stage they're in. How do I do that? Take a deep breath, learn about your employees, and communicate with them. What are you looking for? Where are you going? And then last but not least, but engage them, which is step 7. So as a leader, if you're not engaging your employees and building that credibility with them, then your development is not going to happen. So your foundation starts with you and it ends with you. You've got to make sure that your words and actions align and that you connect with the individual through talking with them. You've got to cast clear vision and have clear expectations. Connect the dots of why the receptionist role is just as important as the CEO. And then give opportunities. Give them a safe place to fail. So once again, give them the opportunity to try, share best practices, and then celebrate those wins. And those wins may look very, very different between the positions. Your salespeople want individual wins. Your support team may want those shared goals. Don't make me compete against my friend. For me, I love that individual win. I want to win. Wendy, do you like to compete against other people when you're
No,
on the team?
no, I prefer the team goals, and we're all in it together.
Yes, so we're all in it together. So as we're looking at, and I know we're coming short on time, I just want you to think about this. Final thoughts is remember, you are the linchpin. You to create this great development, you've got to have communication with each other. You've got to hold your team accountable and you have to engage them. And guess what? You're in the center of that. So if you don't know how to do any of that, then give us a call. We're happy to help with that. But start with yourself. Really take some of that time to self reflect. I know Carrie said if you have any questions, go ahead and type them in. You can type them in now. As you're looking at those questions, we do have some takeaways. We've got some onboarding sample checklists. So if you don't have an onboarding team program, you can take a look at that to download. We've got some motivational tips as well as a copy of this presentation. One of the questions we're frequently asked is, what do you do with someone on your team who thinks that they need to be promoted and move forward, but you don't agree with it? Very best thing I would say is use a third party, nonpartisan. Sometimes emotions get in the middle of it. We have a great suite of development reports, whether it's leadership, sales, service, collections, that will talk to that person, once again, unbiased, that will say, here are your strengths and your challenges. And now you can have something that you can look at and say, do you agree, disagree with that? Let's start working on some of those action plans to move forward. In addition, if you say, okay, I don't have time, Kim, but I've got some people, we offer some great one-on-one consultations. So you can reach out to me where we offer either webinars, team development, or one-on-one staff consultation. And then next month, we have some great webinars. So we are doing a 4-week series all about leadership. So there'll be 3 webinars. The first one is February 1st, how soft skills affect leadership. And then we will have the paid webinar as well that says how to succeed as a first-time manager. That will allow your managers to receive the leadership report as well as really dive deeper into their leadership style. So if you're interested, please email me or you can go ahead and sign up. Follow us. I don't see any questions. Wendy, do you have any final thoughts?
I would just say don't let the obstacles get in your way because a good development plan is a good retention plan, and you want to hold on to those A players.
Absolutely. And so, thank you very much. I hope you have a wonderful day. Stay warm outside. Thank you for the applause. Greatly appreciate that. And if you do have any questions, my contact information is there, as well as you can reach out to Wendy, and we're happy to help you. So, thank you very much. Have a great day, everybody.